Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of Mike Happens. Today is we're switching things up. We're not going to continue down the entertainment industry in terms of guests. Like I said, we're going to bring on a bunch of people from all walks of life. Today we have is someone that I have the pleasure of bringing on. He is the owner of Inner Health and Growing Wellness Center. He's a licensed independent clinical social worker. He uses a combination of CBT mindfulness training to help embrace a new way of life. He also does telehealth, and he also runs men's support groups, which is pretty fitting because that was one of the reasons bringing him on today, because men's mental health is in June. But we will touch on all subjects and get to know George better. Let's welcome George Haywood to the podcast. Welcome on, George.
Thank you.
How you doing today? Doing good?
Good. Yep. Can't complain. It's a good day. Yep. It's a good day.
So let's jump into it. Let's get to know you more. Kind of give people your background. What got you into wanting to help people in, I guess, this capacity? Because I think being, a therapist and being someone like that, that's a big task to take on as a human. And, I commend you for that. But yeah, let's dive into that a little bit.
Well, I started out 30 years ago in law enforcement, corrections, probation.
Okay.
And I got in mainly, to be honest, I'm a nosy guy. I'm really curious how people uh, move. I'm intrigued with why people do what they do, but I do it from a level that I'm not judging them. And many, many years ago, when I was working loss prevention in retail, I was really curious to see and ask people, why are you shoplifting? Not because I'm criticizing and not because I'm just curious. And that kind of led me into criminal justice. Uh, People with certain behaviors, not necessarily bad. I just, there's a system where I can be in contact with them and I can explore. And if they want to change their behavior, great. If they don't, that's fine too. But I was more towards the curious, the more intrigue, and wanting to know people's story. So if you're the punitive guy, you're not supposed to care about people's story. So that's why probation was a good place, because I could get history and I can see patterns. And um, it made me understand the difference between helping and supporting. Helping is more engaged, more involved, is personal. Supporting is taking a step back and watching people what they do. And I realized if you're going to stay in this field and live a healthy life, you got to be more of the supportive, because helping, you're going to burn yourself out. And I've seen a lot of people burn or take up unhealthy lifestyles, unhealthy coping, drinking, smoking, just so. In order to be supportive, I had to literally take a step back and be more observant of people's behaviors and just be aware of resources. And in 2004, I wouldn't say it's a midlife crisis, but it was midlife awareness that I need
Something
to
clicked.
find. I need to do something different, because I wasn't happy with being a PO, because I had people around me who liked locking up others. I was around people who liked, because I was a juvenile probation officer. So not only was it affecting a kid and their future, but their family. That it really didn't work for me. And here I am telling these kids, hey, you got to find a job that you like. Uh, don't go to the jobs that you hate. And here I am I'm a hypocrite. So I remember talking to my friend who worked in a court clinic, and he said, what you want to do, you can do it, but you can't, it's not going to work in the courts, because the courts are always going to be punitive. And he said, before you leave, look around and find out, understand why it's not working. And what I learned was the court system is not, there's a lot of injustice in the justice system. And I think a lot of people go to systems looking for help. Big systems aren't built to help. We got to learn to help ourselves.
Yeah, you just end up in a circle, just kinda in
Exactly.
a loop.
So you got to learn the rules. You got to learn the policies. And if there's mistakes, learn from that. Don't get stuck in it. And it just really changed my perspective. And my friend had told me, learn, watch, and get your master's. You get your master's, the world is yours, and get licensed. So uh, soon after that, there was a promotion opportunity. It was me and two other people, and there was two spots. And I thought, okay, I could actually stay in probation, be a supervisor, and do some macro stuff. This is my thought process. Not realizing the two other candidates, one was the son of a judge, and the other one did a lot of campaigning for political people. And that's the system. And that's not me. And I needed to see that. And I needed to feel that. And I had a choice. I can either say, "Boy, point me where, or learn and go another direction." So soon after that, uh, I moved. I was in Boston. I left Boston. I earned my master's. Still was able to see the shady political nonsense that I chose not to get involved with. And soon as I got my master's with two challenging placements, one at the VA and another one in prison, uh, difficult environments, systems with stuff going on, but I was able to learn. Um, Once I got out of that, my internships, I got my master's. I had just a head of steam, just ready to move forward. The challenge is when you do that in your early 40s. Was my early 40s? No, it was my late 30s. I had three kids and a
That was gonna be
wife.
my next question. I'm like,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
was that,
yeah,
doing that, like, most people, a lot of people do change careers in, their 30s and stuff like that. But, I would say most people try to go to college, stick with that career, and like, that's or whatever they're doing, that's where they're going. How is that with, balancing personal relationships and just trying to work and like live and be an adult on top of
yeah.
having to
That
do all
that
that?
is where you could kind of say it was a crisis because it was a lot of negotiation, a lot of planning, and I've always told my kids, you got to challenge yourself. If you're not challenged, you're not living. And I felt I'm role modeling for my girls. I have three daughters, and it's not supposed to be easy. And we gotta learn to sacrifice. So there was a 2-year stretch of just like around the clock. If I wasn't working on one job, I was working on another. I wasn't at that job, I was studying. I was spending time with my kids, with my wife. Had my master's took 2 years. Had it been another month, it just would never have worked. But I was able to put everything together. And because I felt so inspired by kind of bucking the system and walking away from a state gig into something that I knew there was a need. I just had to be smart and be careful. That really just propelled me into let's just go. Let's just see what life brings us. So for 4 or 5 years, I tried different jobs, got some experience, learned. Um, I worked on a program that understood, taught me about programming in communities, knowing how to schedule, understand my demographic. I worked at another place, Crisis, which was great experience. It was crazy, exciting, but it was a third shift, and I saw the highest risk of the high risk in the ER, but it allows you to hone up your clinical skills. It was like going back to school. It was just super exciting. But, working a third shift with kids, at some point that catches up. But I did leave there with great experience understanding insurances, understanding how to bill, good contacts. And at one point, I had an offer to get a probation gig as an administrator. And it was a really tough decision. I could either go back to probation and sit behind a desk 9 to 5 and make decent money and be absolutely miserable, or challenge myself in a prison. I've always felt the prison, man, That's when you earn your stripes. So I walked away from that probation gig, and I spent 2 amazing years in a prison that just put me in a whole nother level. It taught me how to do groups. It taught me how to challenge my fears. It taught me how to work as a co-facilitator. It was everything I do today that is healthy and great as a clinician comes from the prison because you have to.
Yeah, I think
Um,
your toughest experiences in whatever kind of career you're in, like,
yeah,
you're hitting that bar that's higher than where you want to be. That way,
yeah,
when you're lower, it's like it
yeah,
really does help things. And I've experienced that. I like to, I guess I'll compare that to stilt walking. For me,
yeah,
stilt walking, I did some difficult, you know, uh, events and different terrains and like getting outside of my comfort zone. That way, when I'm doing the more basic stuff, it's that much easier.
yeah. But you don't know. I say this to the clients all the time. You don't know what you got until you're challenged. It was a little scary because it was a big facility, and the CEOs really wanted nothing to do with me, especially being a male, a black male. It was, I learned boundaries. I learned how to sit inside. There's so many really, really great things I learned, and I really, really appreciate it. I would still be there to this day, except in February 2020, we had groups, and the guys weren't shackled. I had groups of 8 to 10, high risk, moderate to high risk guys. Mid February, my groups dwindled down from 8 to 10 to 6 to 8, which is rare because all my guys showed up. I talked to CEOs. CEOs like, don't worry about it. Okay. A week went by, my groups went down to 6 to 4. I asked the guys even seemed concerned. I went to CEOs. They said, oh, don't worry about it. So I went to my boss. My boss, like, oh, this is prison. This is what happens. Don't worry about it. But I was worried. And I realized I worried because I have a therapeutic relationship with these guys. They're not just thugs in a cell. I work with these guys and they come back because they require that support. So I'm like, if I don't ask, then I don't care. And I obviously do care. So uh early March, my groups went down to 4, and then one of my groups was canceled because no one was showing up. Not because they were sick. Mind you, this is March of 2020.
Yeah, right as COVID's about to go down.
March, I'm showing up, and there's a big line to get into the prison. And I asked, what's going on? And they said, they're not going to let us in. I'm like, well, why not? Because there's an illness going around, and they don't want us to get sick. So we're going to just have to take these laptops and work from home. So I'm like, what am I going to do with that? He goes, well, just work on your programming and we'll figure it out. 3 weeks later, remember, this is from February to early April, I get a call from DPH telling me that they've had cameras in my groups, and 2 of the guys that initially wasn't showing up to the groups had COVID, and they've passed on.
My goodness, wow.
So I'm sitting at home and um and kind of processing all of this as my daughter's upstairs with what we thought was a really bad cold, and my wife is home from work. So I'm like, you're telling me you have 2 guys that were in my group that were sick. You guys knew it, and you're just telling me 2 months down the road. And then, well, systems, policy, blah, 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 blah. So I said, all right. So at that point, I went to my wife and I said, I don't know. I'm not certain this is the right job, and I apologize. You just found out. We went to get a COVID test, came back negative. A week later, she got sick. 2 weeks later, I got sick. Then I get a call in early May from DPH, just checking up on you. Just want to know one other guy who's in your group is deceased.
Oh my goodness.
I said, okay, that's all I need to know. So I said to my wife, all right, this is a unique challenge. I'm not going to let this knock me down. I'm going to do what I do in prison outside of prison. So at that point, I got a part-time gig as a clinician in a program. Um, I really didn't know much about it, but allowed me to kind of spread my wings. As I did that, that's when I opened up my practice. And it's a risk, but everything you do, in life is a risk. So I transitioned from the prison to the Brockton site as well as to my clinic. Little did I know, because COVID was so, you know, it affected everyone. My caseload um, blew up. Uh, Everyone was panicking. Everyone had some level of anxiety. Everyone was stressed. And during that time, a lot of clinicians I was friends with went out of business because they didn't want to do virtual. They didn't want to do telehealth. And some of them are getting sick. So it's kind of like a game changer. Either you had to step up and adjust or get out of the game.
I think every kind of career that kind of happens with, for instance, like voiceover. Actually, COVID. COVID was a big reason why I'm in a
Mm.
booth right now, and
Yeah.
people not going to studios in LA and New York and stuff like that. Like they figure out a way. There's this thing called Source Connect, and you can just, you know, basically it's like you're in a studio with the engineer. When you're connected in that sense and recording, and they get to record locally and all that. So that was a big shift, and there's some apprehensive, thoughts behind it, just people not getting behind it. And but the people that went with it, I think is huge. But now at this point, if you can just go into your living room or wherever and studio down in your house, I think that's a lot better than having to drive somewhere, and especially in LA or New York.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that was a game changer. I was in a facility. I was in a building with actually six other clinicians. They were booming with business. There was two clinicians that I hardly saw because they worked with kids, so they were always busy. Once COVID hit, they went out of business because you can't interact with kids on virtual.
Yeah, 'cause they probably didn't. There's like a gray area, right, for like the I guess in terms of HIPAA and everything, right?
And how do you plan to? And so yeah, they one went to teaching, and I think another one consults, but they went out of business. A lady across the hall from me who was always busy, she ended up teaching at Bridgewater. There's one other clinician, I don't know, she just disappeared. And the lady next to me who I trained to get licensed, she stayed for like a year and she's been virtual ever since. My supports in my practice disappeared, but my cases were just blowing up. And I had different demographic. I had some CEOs that would come in. I had a superintendent that came in, mostly men, because this is kind of the dynamic. Men can get away with just being linear by just working and bringing in money and having that identity. Well, when work shuts down,
Yeah, and
they
you have
get a
40 hours that you don't know what to do with,
right,
you know?
right. And I literally had a guy say, I come home and I see this pretty lady walking around and these little kids, and that's my wife. And those are but I don't know how to interact with them. My job has always been the provider. That's what my dad did. That's what my dad's dad did. So how am I going to deal with this? And then I had nurses who'd come in who'd never been to therapy because they had so many patients dying, and they feel like failures, and they couldn't contact the doctors because the doctors were doing it for. It was a wave of stuff, and it was no different than working at the prison or working as probation. You have to make a choice. Am I going to become a victim of this, or am I going to evolve and learn and try to find my way? So COVID helped me have a better understanding of my role, that I have to have a boundary. If I want to survive this, I want to live through this in a healthy way in my career, I got to have a boundary. And that's why I find I'm more of a support than a helper. Um, and I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with that. And that's definitely helped me when it comes to maybe difficult situations and sessions. Let people feel how they feel. Let people, make their choices. And if it's a great choice, great. If not, that's okay too. Doesn't mean you failed. If you're okay with it, you're okay with it. If you're not, then my job is to give you some support as you think of other options.
So, back to the prison, real quick. How how was it to gain trust for these high profile kind of offenders and stuff like that? And I'm sure I could be wrong, but I'm sure a lot of them had a bit of a shell around them in terms of trying to get through to them. And also, you mentioned what you were just kind of talking about. How have and obviously those people passing away was probably that was a lot for you at the time, and just
Hmm.
kind of it was a different experience, I'm sure.
Hmm.
How were you able to separate personal from therapy, and during the difficult times? Like, what are some tools that I guess you use to um, work with that? Because again, you deal with such tough conversations, and never mind, 2020 was tough. We're in a tough time again. It's like high tension scenario. So curious on those couple things there.
There's a word I use every week. I don't know why I don't put it on my wall. Boundaries.
Boundaries. Yep.
It doesn't mean I'm on an island. Doesn't mean I'm pushing you away, but I'm not in your business. And I learned that years ago when I was a PO. I had some high risk kids, gang kids. I was in and out of Fidelis Way in Boston, a lot of the housing. And as long as I knew this is their home, this is their space, I'm only going in there for 15 minutes. I got to respect that. If I respect them, they'll respect me. I had a lot of really, really high risk kids, but as long as they don't cross that line, and I had good relationships with these kids and these parents because I didn't cross that line. I'm not the man. I'm respecting where they are. And I took that into the prison. I didn't really understand it until I was sitting in the group. Because you got to realize the prison I worked with were convicted sex offenders. All right.
Okay,
These
that's
are
heavy.
high risk guys who have the art of manipulation down to a T, but that's all learned behavior. We're not wired anyway. And getting to know people enough, I understand that there's a really good chance I may be the first male, the black male, to tell these guys, yeah, your crimes are horrific, but those crimes doesn't have to define you. And when they come into treatment, they've already admitted what they did. They're in treatment because they're going to try to figure out how to do better. Because majority of them are going to be out. They're going to be my neighbor, your neighbor. So they're looking for tools. So knowing that, I actually had leverage because they need me. And if they're going to act stupid, I used to have a safety switch. I hit the switch, and within seconds, a whole bunch of CEOs would pull that guy out. But I never had to use that because I was honest with myself. If I didn't feel comfortable in a group, I wouldn't go to a group. But that's the beauty of working with people. Uh, People are sponges. If you're feeling good and you're not judgmental, people are gonna feel that. But if you're gonna judge them, and they're gonna feel that too, and they're not gonna come to your group. So I told myself from day one, this is going to be a challenge, no different than going into the projects, no different than going to the projects in Charlestown. I gotta be confident in myself. I gotta know my role, and if I don't cross that boundary and I do what I'm supposed to do, it's gonna work out. And it's the same mentality. The difference was I was locked in. So you can't like walk out 15 minutes. You're locked in. And it was an open bay. So there's three clinicians with 75 guys. No chains. They're just walking like a dorm. And there's one CO.
Yeah, that's a
So
tough ratio.
it's a tough ratio, but
But
to be honest with you, it just I had so much confidence knowing like, wow,
yeah,
how
you earn their
fortunate.
trust.
Yeah, how fortunate am I to do this and earn the trust of these guys who've probably never trusted a man with their dad, or the only men they've probably been involved with are COs, a lawyer who in their mind failed them, a judge behind the bench, and a police officer. So I'm different. But that's part of treatment, that's part of change, and accepting that I appreciate that you guys give me a chance because you don't have to. But this is part of learning and growing and evolving because when you get out, there's possibly other men who could support you. But if you push them away, you can end up right back here. So just understanding boundaries, whether it's in a prison or one-on-one. I actually had a guy last week who was venting, and if you didn't know any better, you would have thought, "Ooh, this is probably high risk." No, no. What we have to do as men, we got to learn to express our feelings because we suppress a lot. So, as long as you give them boundaries and give them the opportunity to share, and then at some point you can encourage them to kind of rein it in a little bit because not everyone's going to be as calm as me. And at some point they figure it out. But it, you know, I, it's a common theme with men. We just really don't know how to communicate because we weren't never really taught. We can get away with being linear. We can, our role models, whether it's Mike Tyson, Sylvester Stallone, Rambo, these are all men with no feelings. They break things. Athletes, Joe DiMaggio, you know, we have all these role models. There is no affect, which is great to some degree, but relationships, it doesn't work well. That doesn't work well. And I would say majority of my men who come to me, they didn't have the best teachers and their life is not the way they want it because they haven't really learned how to do it.
So, how important do you think, being a black male, how do you think that kind of, separates you and just kind of gives you maybe even a different perspective and or I guess comfort level with your clients and everything?
It changes the stereotype. Um, I work with all types. I have people coming down in the black community from Hyde Park and Jamaica Plain, a few from Roxbury who've never had men in their lives. And that's pretty cool to be able to influence these young men and these young women who may have issues with their fathers. Um, but I also change the stereotype with people who are not black, who may be afraid of me or don't trust black community and realize, wow, I don't have to hold on to my purse when I'm talking to Haywood, or and that's okay. It's all about learning. It's all about growing, and it's about changing the stereotype by changing the narrative, and that's not a bad thing. Whether you're a teen or in your late 50s or 60s, and I've had people older who's like, oh, I didn't know I could have this kind of conversation, and I know what he's saying, but that's okay. That's all right. Now you know. And that's the beauty of therapy. It's like kind of like going to school. You're learning, you're growing, and you're able to kind of see um, light and life in a different perspective, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think in general, men's health has been a stigma, and for me, it's been, I'm big on mental health and therapy and everything, and it's cool to see that I guess newer generations and stuff be more open to it because growing up for me, and even I know probably your generation, it's very much like what happens in this house stays in this house, and it's like, and then no communication happens, and then there's the stigma, and then you have like you're saying how males are just go to work and like I don't know how to act outside of it, and even as recent as COVID, like males tend to hide in their work and avoid and just I'm working doing this is what I do, this is life, and then when that gets taken away they're like I don't know what to do.
Right. Yeah. When I do intakes, I always do. It's called a geniogram. A geniogram is like a family tree, and the beauty of that is allows you to see your client's culture. And I go back to grandparents. What did the grandparents establish in the family as norms? And what did mom and dad um, bring into my client's life? So you have a general understanding of what's going on, what's worked and what hasn't worked. And even the client doesn't see it as a weakness, that's okay, but it gives you a broad idea where things are going. And I can tell you, all families, not most, all families have secrets, right? And all families have stuff. It's what you do with it, right? If it works for you and you're okay and it helps you, like I've had some families where they have an understanding of money. They kind of take care of the money and it's a accountability and it's a little stress, but it works. Granddad put money in the bank, and now the parents kind of took care of it, and they've passed that on to their kids. And there's not a worry because that money's taken care of. All right, that's fine. I understand that. But then there's the other side. When granddad works 70 hours a week and pays no attention to grandma. And then they have kids where the son is working 70 hours because that's the expectation. And his partner is not happy because he's not around. And then the kids see it. And it's okay to kind of look at that and ask the client, this has been your blueprint. Are you okay with that? If you are, great. If not, what can we do to change that? And sometimes just opening up that door, you gotta get a little bit of pushback because, oh, this is my family expectations. I get it. That wasn't a question though. How do you feel about that? And that opens the door of, well, maybe I could tweak a few things and adjust a few things. And that allows the person to do the work they need to do. Or not. I had a guy, actually, I saw him in the beginning of COVID, and he admitted he's a workaholic. His parents are both workaholics, and he's in the mid-30s, and he had sleeping issues, just some anxiety stuff. The more he talked to me, it was hard for him to talk about it because, and I get this, there's this loyalty to mom and dad, and there's loyalty to, and I completely respect that. But this really has nothing to do with mom and dad. It's about how you receive that information. You can say it's okay, I don't want to do that. And that's where I support and kind of get them kind of to, you know, trust yourself. Trust these limits you're doing. And that doesn't mean you're a bad son or a bad person, but believe in yourself. And at some point he was able to, with a lot of encouragement, he was able to work like 50 hours and 45 hours. And when he got to 40 hours, man, he was so proud of himself. During the session, he was crying and anything was possible. And, parents aren't completely okay with it, but he was proud that he was able to do something that he knew if he continued that, it would be disaster. Just being able to walk people through that family stuff, it's a little bit of a challenge, but it's really not my journey. If it's too much, you can't do it. That's okay. All right. When you're ready, you're ready. If you're not, you're not. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means maybe it's harder than what you thought it was. But it's real important for me to respect the influence of families, of culture, and don't try not to get my stuff. That's the boundary. Don't get my stuff caught up into that.
Yeah, I think, one of the big things is probably taking kind of the pressure off them and getting them out of the echo chamber, so to say, to get them to think outside of that circle. And, I think,
Just when they talk about it and I don't challenge them, I don't. You can just see like, wow,
yeah, it's
this is
organic thoughts
yeah.
happening. Yeah.
I just put it out there, and it's been here for a long, long time, and this guy is not coming after me. He's not questioning me, and that starts it. That starts it going, which is really, really cool.
So how, different walks of life and, different cultures and stuff like you mentioned, um, I think it's how difficult it is to break kind of, generational trauma and stuff like that. And, teaching people that your grandmother's anxiety isn't your anxiety or your depression or whatever it might be. Um, how do you open those doors for people?
Hey, to be honest with you, I'm a client-driven clinician. I don't feel like open the doors. They open the door. And
You
I
just you
repeat,
just give them the keys.
yeah,
Give them the
well, you know
tools.
what? Some people they've had the keys. They just haven't had the confidence to open that door. So as soon as they come in, as soon as they walk in my door, that's different. Soon as they identify what's going on, that's different. And my job is to support them, and I let them know you're making the first steps right here, just being here. All right. If you didn't come here and kept everything going for years, you're part of the problem. So where this goes is really up to you. And I really believe people are visual people mostly. So when I do a geniogram, I can draw it on a dry erase board so they can look at it. And I try to explain to them, this is you. This is your story. All right. And sometimes it's easy to digest the story when you see it instead of just keeping stuff here. And as they talk about it, again, I just let them share their story and I just follow along, which is no different than when I worked in probation. And the fun thing about probation is they let you work any community you wanted to. So there were times I was up in Revere working with the Southeastern Asian families, Cambodian families that I really knew nothing about. And I'd walk in their homes and they would remind me to take my shoes off and they would tell me about the history and the story. Or I'd work with some Jamaican families that they would tell me their story. I work in Charlestown with some of the Irish families or the Italian families. That's the beauty of working with people. It's just, if you're willing, they can take you for the journey and you can learn so much. But you got to be open to it because if you're not open to it, they're going to feel that and then they're going to show you to do it. So been a continuation in some ways from probation to prison to working in a clinic, just listening to the stories and supporting people with the changes they want to make. And, even if there's some glaring things, I actually met with a guy yesterday who, uh, he's in his early 60s. He says he's been smoking weed for 40 years, but he's okay with it. Who am I to, right? It's not a problem to him. He says he has some concerns, but his concern is something else. So I'm going to follow his lead. I'm going to go to what something else is. I think by doing that, I'm building trust with him. And my guess at some point he's going to go back to smoking weed because there's a lot of other drug things that he's not ready to work on. That's fine. That's fine. Just lead me to the issue and we'll figure this out. And with families, I always, there are going to be some landmines here and there, but I just got to find my way around it and just trust that my client's going to do what he needs to do or what she needs to do.
So do you think, your perspective, compared to, other mental health workers and stuff like that, I know you mentioned you do it out of curiosity, not out of judgment. Do you think is that a common theme between, other clinicians and stuff like that? And or do you think that gives you edge in terms of like making people more comfortable with you, if that makes sense?
I think I want to think most clinicians are curious. I mean, you got to like people,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and, and I want to believe the core of most clinicians they like people. But my experience is different. I've been in for 32 years, and I was fortunate in the path that I took. Most probation officers don't go into this field. Most probation officers stay, make a little bit of money, and then tap out. So I've been very fortunate, and I have a lot of experience in systems. I worked at DYS, I worked at DCF, I worked in probation, I was at the VA. I've been at, I was a director at a clinic for 5 years. So I have a lot of that under my hat. So there's really not much that's going to be thrown at me as a clinician that I haven't seen before. So that helps because I don't really get jammed up with stuff because I've been down that path. And I also know the demographic that I work with. I don't take everyone. There's certain groups that it's just not my strength. And like I don't work with um cognitive delayed people. Not because I don't like them. It just takes a lot of work and I just don't have that energy anymore. I don't work with strictly substance abuse because um It's a it's a dynamic that I'm not that familiar with, and be honest, that population, I think, would rather work with people in recovery, and so, I don't know that, and I respect that. I used to work with all teens, but I don't work with all teens because that's a ton of work, and that's why I'm gray. Um, I just with the teen, you gotta work with the father, you gotta work with the mother, you gotta
Yeah,
work
it's a
with the
whole family
school.
package.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
lot of work. If you do it right, you gotta work with everyone. And I know some clinicians that cut corners and that catches up. I work with a few teens that I really enjoy because they got really involved parents and they're kind of low risk. Um, but I think as a clinician, you have to evolve, you have to adjust and adapt, like you tell your clients. And I think because of my experience and unfortunately seeing clinicians not adapt and burn out, I had learned from that, and I just gotta stay on the horse and just kind of roll with what comes at me.
I love that. Yeah. So I feel like one of the common themes that a lot of people kind of say is, I'm fine. Why do you think so many people kind of just default to I'm fine? And particularly, men. I think men. I could be wrong. I might be biased because I'm a male, but I would say men probably do it more and try to do that shell and, like you said, just go to work and put their head down and do their thing. Why do you think so many people go out and just resort to that and not want to jump into what's going on really?
Well, when I hear I'm fine, that says I'm not ready to do that work. And I'm okay with that.
Okay.
But I also ask after that, well, how's it working for you? You're in the therapy office. What are we gonna do with this? Do we just table this and come back or not? Or something is not working for you to be in my office. So I'm not gonna do the work. I'm going to encourage you to really look at that statement, and you got to be honest with yourself or not. And if you go on with your fine life with, you keep running in debt or cheating on your girl or, getting stressed because your kids don't talk to you or running in and out of jail or you can't find housing or you can't keep a job and one of those things are happening, which is why you're here. So I'm not going to take the lead. I'm going to let you lead. And if you really think you're fine and you feel fine, that's okay. Here's my number. Don't lose my number, and more power to you. I think, unfortunately, a lot of men, um, we don't know how to process feelings, and because it's uncomfortable. And when it's uncomfortable, unfortunately, we fall back to either avoidance or deal with it by avoiding that responsibility, avoiding that pain by smoking or drinking or vaping. But what COVID taught us is you can do that all you want. Problem's still there. I had a lot of people who smoked and drank a little bit before COVID, and COVID hit, and they either lost their jobs or housing got bad, or they couldn't pay their mortgage, and they became very engaged in their drinking and smoking, and that heightened their anxiety because they realized now I got another problem. Now what little money I've had, I'm blowing on weed, I'm blowing on vaping, and it just snowballs. But
Yeah,
that's the way to work through that is just to be honest and say, okay, this is not working. And all right, what's the solution? Instead of putting all that energy on the problem, put some energy in the solutions, whatever that might be.
yeah, and I think crutches like that. They help temporarily. In a sense, like it's probably it might feel good in the short term, but if
Right,
you drinking every day for 6 months straight, yeah, you're probably getting like just stock anxiety from just
right,
putting that in your body every day. So
right. And you're
um,
prolonging the solution because you hammered and then you hung over and then you feel bad. And that's 3 days that you could have done something, but you chose not to. Yeah, it's unfortunately a lot of men, they haven't had the experience when they were younger of sitting down and having a male, or maybe it's someone who they care about, and sat down and said, "How do you feel?" Right? But no, we're robots. We just pick things up and put things down, and we deflect responsibility, and we just do things until we get older, and life comes at us, and whether it's a rent payment or a school issue or relation, and we just don't know how to manage that. And rather than talking about it because we don't know, we just bury ourselves in other things until it does catch up to you.
yeah, and I think back to not having a male or someone to kind of talk to like growing up. It's again generational in terms of like that same
You know,
your dad or whoever it might be like that that generational is like, oh, well, he was probably having that happen to him. Like he didn't have someone to talk to. So like, it's his first walk through life too. So there's a good chance you guys are at a similar level of trying to get on communicating and stuff, and or you're surpassing, your I guess elders, so to say. Like I feel like there's probably a bit of an awakening when that happens, when you
Yeah.
start kind of mentally, emotionally kind of surpassing. That's not the best word to be using, but just kind of being on a different level and being there. How do people work through that and then you know still maintain those relationships, so to say, and still kind of work through that?
So my men's group, it's a 12-week group, and the first 3 weeks we go over a genogram. And a genogram, like I told you, it's like a family tree, and you identify your father, stepfather, mother, stepmom, grandparents. And the beauty of it is it plays itself out. And most we know it. It's all in our head. But when we keep it in our head, we keep out the gray area. We keep out some of the uncomfortable things. But when you put it up on a dry erase board, it's all right there. And that cool thing about the group, and I try to tell the guys, don't be judgmental because you're gonna be next. And this is all about learning and growing. This is not about criticizing. When you put it on a dry erase board, you can see, dad struggled with this, and grandfather. But when you see their eyes get huge when they recognize, oh my gosh, I don't know if that's me or my dad or my grandfather. And then you can also expand, put like uncles or aunts, and you see warts and all, but you also see, like, I hear this often when I work with a male. Grandma was like the salt of the earth. Grandma kept everyone together.
Hey, that was
And
the
that,
same for me. Same for
yeah,
me.
and when guys talk about it, some guys like brings tears to their eyes.
Yeah.
And that's, we're not doing this. We're not going back to just focus on the bad. Look at some of the love that was there. Look at that glue. And what does that mean to you? And that's the beauty of therapy, is being able to kind of open up that back door and figure out what worked, what didn't work, so you can understand it and comprehend it and use it as you move forward. And it can be very emotional. It can, because you're exposing everything that's been kept up here because it's not comfortable. But that's okay. That's okay. And it can impact the group, because after I do 3 weeks, because I give guys time to actually talk about a little about their family, so it's not traumatic. And what I do is I give them a sheet for them to write out their own genogram, and then when it's their time, I write it out for them on the dry erase board, because I've seen some guys as they're writing, the hand is shaking because it's so personal. So it's a great way to kind of convey support and guidance on my part and share with the group. And the awesome thing is someone will talk about this cool uncle, and another guy in the group who's a stranger will say, "Hey, I had that." Or someone will say, "My granddad would go fishing," and someone says, "Oh, I remember doing that." It's, and once that is over, the group runs just swimmingly. And when we talk about healthy, unhealthy relationships, we talk about, every week is something different. We talk about anger management, stress management, role modeling, the difference, how to, we talk about grief, the difference between lust and love. We hit all the guy topics that we would like to talk about, but we don't. And by the time we end on week 12, instead of 12 strangers, it's a community. And I had a group that wrapped up 3 years ago, and they still meet every other week on Wednesdays.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
And I have a group on Tuesdays that wrapped up a year ago, and now they meet once a month. They would meet more, but they got busy schedules. The topic is, let's just check in. And they go straight through 90 minutes, and I usually have to say, "Hey, we got to wrap. I got to go home." But it's cool because it's the beauty of being able to be honest, and the connection, and be able to have community without drugs, without stupid stuff. It just talking about their issues and supporting each other, and it kind of does its own thing. But it usually, I'm gonna be honest, it starts with the geniogram because they realize, wow, we may not know each other, but we actually have a lot in common.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. I think that's one thing unique as a human compared to all these other you know animals and creatures in the kingdom. Um, Is storytelling. That's one thing that, like, humans have that I think, that's one of the unique things is, like, storytelling. That's what humans
Mhm.
thrive on. That's
Right,
I for me, I think that's where we have real connections is when we start having those conversations, start talking, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, I had an uncle that I really liked," or, "My
right,
grandma was the glue in the family," stuff like that. Um, so, what tools do you use for them? Because I'm sure this ends up coming up. They realize like, oh, this pattern's from my dad or mom or whoever, and this is why I have this. And
right.
how do you teach them or help them, so to say, to not have resentment, if that makes sense? I feel like that probably is like a common theme in times like that where they're like, I'm mad I'm this way because this person in my family made it more
Right,
difficult and I'm dealing with all these uphill battles, but
right,
also, maintaining a relationship with them if they still are around.
right.
Elaborate a little bit more on that.
So I think it starts off with the intake when we try to understand this is their journey. And part of that, you got to try to set a boundary that the choices your dad and mom make may not been on purpose. Sometimes you work with what you have. And that doesn't mean they're bad parents or bad people. They just didn't have the capacity and they didn't have those resources. But at some point, in order to move forward in your life and do your own work, you have to come to terms with this is my journey. In order for my journey, I have to learn to forgive, which is not the easiest thing to do. But, if you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, this is your stuff. And the way I look at it, it's an opportunity to correct it. Or you could stay in yesterday and blame and play the victim, but that's not going to get you anywhere, especially if you have kids, because your kids are watching you.
Yeah. And
So it's just being honest with yourself, being honest about your commitment and treatment, commitment of being um moving forward. And again, if people are stuck in that, they're stuck with it. But I usually question, what are we doing here? You're beating up something that was yesterday. It could have been 20, 30, 40 years ago. How are you going to move forward if you're still holding on to that? And what do you think you can do to have some closure? I'm a big, big journaling fan. Writing a letter, and letters can be super emotional, but it's a good way to kind of close that chapter. And you can do whatever you want with that letter. Put it in a fire pit, hold on to it, shred it. Um, I've had some people they hold on to it to remind themselves so they don't fall backwards, so they can remind themselves, "Oh yeah, I've closed this chapter." Right? But there's a lot of different tools, but again, that's it's really up to the client what they're willing to do and what they're capable of doing. But the fact that they can talk about it is a good step because that's awareness.
yeah, and I think forgiveness is such a big thing that people don't realize. Everyone thinks it's for the other person. Well, not everyone. I think a lot of people, they're like, "Oh, I'm forgiving this person, and they're getting off scot free or whatever it is." It's like, no, you're doing that for you, right?
Yeah.
Like that's for you, and
Yep.
back to getting stuff out. That's similar to what you were saying. Like you had for your men's group, you had them write on the board and everything. Same with I would say writing in a journal, right? It's very similar. Just getting that out of your head, physically removing that from your head. Now it's here, and now you don't have this mental clutter kind of
Right.
happening.
And the great thing about a journal, you're going to feel a certain way again. And if you want to know how to solve it, go back to your journal and you're helping yourself. You're not letting that experience bring you back. You're cutting it off right here and now. So you learn to build this inner trust with yourself that you probably didn't have before. And that will propel you to move forward and feel better about yourself instead of having the situation bring you back.
I think the common theme is, everyone writes, right? You're writing a letter, you're writing whatever, but the what you do with it is different, right? The only common theme is you writing it down. You don't have to afterwards read it. You don't have to, burn it. You don't have to do this. You can do what you feel comfortable with.
Right.
I think a lot of people think that they have to, reflect and read back and read my journal and X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, you could just, you could throw it out if you want, but
Right.
you got that out of your head, and that was the goal.
Absolutely. And being able to even acknowledge that I'm doing something with it instead of knowing that's been wearing me down for years and years and years. That's part of the journey of healing. That's part of the journey of evolving and letting go of the past. And that's a bbig deal. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm sure cultural too. It's that is also an effect. I'm half Portuguese, and my mom was born in Portugal, and my grandmother is very, she came here at, I don't know, 40 years old. She's coming to a new country that she doesn't know the language, and there's just with Portuguese, or especially with my grandfather and grandmother, was very much like, what happens in this house, it stays in this house, and then I would say as generations kind of go on, and I would say my mom, we would talk more than um, my grandmother. My grandma, she was a saint. She was my glue, right?
Hmm.
But she she wouldn't talk about anything. She wouldn't express herself. She wouldn't be like, "I'm sad. Everything's okay. Like, I love you." Blah blah blah. Like, no, don't worry about me. I'm just a little old lady. Blah blah blah.
I think um, a lot of families, and I'm gonna sound like an old man, that originated recently from out of the country, whether Irish community, Portuguese community, Cape Verde community. We have this belief that we are who we are. We have each other. Church communities, right? We keep everything in house.
Yeah, and like those communities too are big on family. So it's like it's just
Exactly. But
cousins and uncles and aunts and like
a
yeah
boundary doesn't mean you completely disregard them. A boundary is something that gives you space to be you. Grandma, that's how she is. That's how she. Okay, but I can't take on grandmom stuff. I remember I had a lot of traditional Portuguese families who were back and forth from the Azores, and when I mentioned boundaries, people looked at me like I had 20 heads. And because grandma's on the first floor, my parents are on the third
yeah.
floor, how am I gonna have boundaries, right? And I kept hearing the same story. I said, well, but you know what? You still have a boundary. You still have walls. You still have a door. You don't work for grandma or mom. You do have, it might be a difficult process. It might be different, but you do have your own space. Because it seemed like a foreign term, I get some resistance, but the more I explained it, we're not kicking out any family, but we're just having some space to be. And at some point, hopefully, the family, they may not like it, but at some point they'll respect it. So you don't go through your life worrying about grandma or worrying about mom and dad. Because if you do all of that, who's going to take care of you?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then once I say that, it's like, oh, okay, I get that. But it's a process. It takes time. It's not something that's uh, you can do overnight, especially when you're brought up with a family where we're all enmeshed. A lot of people say, I'm worried about my uncle, about my grandfather, I worry about, and I'm like, well, they're not here.
Yeah,
What
you're not
about
worried about
you?
you?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
tell me about you. And they would flow into that. I'm like, no, 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 no. You got to if you don't take care of you, you're useless to them. Like, oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah, if you crash and burn and you're going through the works and
Yeah,
you can't take care of yourself and you're trying to
right. You
extend
go
to
to
others, it's not gonna work.
Right, you go to the hospital, they're not gonna operate on your grandparents, or you're in court, they're not gonna talk. They'll talk to you. So do you, not run away, not isolate, but learn to take care of you first, and that's then it'll be probably a little less stressful.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people, are in that fight or flight mode. When there isn't any, you know, uh, that chaos going on there, they're probably trying to search in others and they're, "Oh, well, like, Uncle so and so's got this going on. I got to help him. It's just like, no,
Right,
you're okay. Like you can just you can be supportive, of course, but like you said,
right,
you gotta have boundaries and
right,
understand that they also have to go through their own kind of
right,
trials and tribulations. Like it's not
right,
those aren't your trials and tribulations.
right,
You know.
right. I think I believe we all have some form of anxiety. Uh, Crazy world, family dynamics, work stress, relationship. I mean, think about it. Health issues, uh, all of the above. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's what you do with it. Same thing with anger. It's okay to be angry. Is what do you do with it? Do you drink it away? Do you punch it away? Do you fight it away? Or do you buckle down and work harder? Right? I think a lot of men we get confused. "Well, I got anger issues." Well, what do you do with that anger? If if you fail a test, do you pick up the desk and throw it across the room, or do you kind of take a step back and realize, maybe I should have studied a little bit harder. I'm kind of disappointed. But that's the fight or flight. It's good or bad. I try to encourage people just take your time and think about your options instead of the fight or flight. Look at what's going on, and it may take a little bit of time, but that's okay because the time you take, you're getting a broader understanding of the problem instead of that impulsive, robotic, good or bad, black or white. I don't believe that really helps, especially as we get older and our body starts to break down.
Yeah,
And
I think people need to realize that like it's not black and white, and
yeah, and I say this a lot now. Adulting is not easy, and adulting it's always hard. Uh, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. Um, when adulting isn't hard, you're missing something. Whether it's your bills, whether it's taxes, whether it's relationships, whether it's your health. I mean, it's so when I hear someone say, "Well, it's hard to," yeah, yeah, but if you take a step back, it does just because it's hard doesn't mean you can't do it. But I think it goes into believing in yourself, and I think as a child, we never had that encouragement on believing that although it's difficult, doesn't mean I can't achieve. You know, and the people who have that. That could be with family, it could be in their faith, it could be in the community. I've seen people do wonderful things with Boy Scouts that last into their adulthood. I've seen people do a lot of great things with their faith that last into their adulthood. I've seen a lot of people do well with like gymnastic coaches. And so it's not always on mom and dad, it's the community that you have around you, cousins, grandparents. Uh, but obviously, your parents somehow have to set that community up. So in case they're not available, they can fall back on someone, you know? And that, what I learned a lot in prison is there were some guys that were super, super resilient that had no one. And somehow they dug deep enough to find their way. And I'm a major, major advocate of people. You gotta believe in your client, you gotta believe in people. And it could take some time, could take 20 years, could take 30 years, but I saw guys locked up for 40 to 50 years figure it out because at some point they said, I want different. I've lived this life that's impulsive and destructive, but now I got nothing. And I I want better. So in order to have better, you got to do better. That's a big jump. That's a big commitment, but I've seen it happen.
yeah, and I think everyone it's in you, right? Like it's like you got to hit whatever rock bottom or whatever you want to call it, and like hit that point where the light bulb goes off. And it's like, okay, no, I don't want this anymore. And I think back to what you were saying, like we all go through stuff and deal with stuff, and it's right now life's just crazy, like in general. So the social climate's just not there right now, and I think we're gonna have these difficult times regardless. We're gonna go
Hmm.
through the river of life, the flow and everything. But if we have tools to make it more positive and or just easier to get through and not have anxiety when you're dealing with these stressful things, I think it makes it that much easier because it's like this is gonna suck anyways, but maybe I can smile while I'm doing it, you know?
Right. Right. Yep. Yeah, and, you know, you conquer one thing, something else is coming. I mean, that's just how life goes. Life is full of, peaks and valleys. So, if things are going well, it doesn't mean it's gonna be gravy for the next 10 or 20 years. Something's coming and just be ready for it, and, if it doesn't work out that well, learn from it, grow from it, and keep moving. Doesn't mean you failed, it doesn't mean you can't. It's just life is full of lessons. You just gotta be ready to learn from it, and as you learn from it, believe in yourself and grow from it.
Absolutely. Not like you were saying when I feel like as humans, when our back's up against the wall, that's when we're really like, challenged and really can, see your true self. And one of the quotes that I've said for a while now, and it's in the midst of chaos, there's always an opportunity. And I
Absolutely.
feel like when I'm in that
Absolutely.
difficult time like that I'm preaching to myself. I'm like, this it's all right. Something's here in this burning house that's happening around me. There is the fire extinguisher to get out of here.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I even say I do, I offer couples counseling, and that is a whole different dynamic because when they come in, the house is on fire. And I try to encourage them that these sessions are essential, they're crucial, they can be very, very emotional. But in this, they could be a moment of glory that you didn't see coming. And that's okay. Because if you didn't want it to happen, you wouldn't be here talking to a stranger about your stuff. And more times than not, it does get kind of crazy, but at some point it kind of plateaus, and then all of a sudden it simmers, and it's awesome because it's so raw and it's so emotional. But it's a really great opportunity to see like the core of human development together, connect the dots. And again, the fact that they come back after they expose themselves is like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But at some point, they pick up on those dots because they want it bad enough, and they understand the pain and understand this hurt, but they're not going to allow that pain and hurt to hold them back anymore. I'm going to expose, and where it goes, which is a huge risk. But it's the beauty of growing and learning and finding your way through that fire. It's pretty cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I think, for couples, they probably aren't coming to you on when they're on good terms, but it's out of a place of love, right? It's like they're if they didn't love each other, they wouldn't be going to that
Right.
session, right? It's like
Right.
there's something there that they're like, this is worth
Right.
fighting for, so to say.
Yeah. And that goes back to me just being curious. Like, all right, something happened. I usually don't get to particulars until they're in my session. So they reach out, book them, and I meet with one individual first and then the other. And they usually tell me very different stories. And when they come in, it's on, and it's just like, oh boy, this is interesting. This is cool. They don't have to be here, and that's how I usually tell them. I respect and admire that you guys are here. We don't know where it's gonna go, but this is a good start. It's the whole gender dynamic plays itself out. Men usually don't like to come in because I'm a dude and they're a dude, and we're protective. And she's the property. Female tells me too much, because I think she wants to talk to him, but she can't, so she vents on me. So now I gotta say, guys, it's not my relationship. All right. Talk to each other. I do a lot of signals like, hey, look at him, look at her. And they do. And then it flows. But it's kind of like a little game like, hey, guy, this is not guy time, right?
Yeah.
I don't get, I don't have to get what's going on with you because it's not my story. Um, and I'm not going to take sides because I'm a guy. You want to talk to her, all right? Because in an hour, I'm out of your life. So share with her. And with the lady, I can feel the anger. I can feel the venom. And I got to say, hey, I'm not the one,
Yeah.
use it, turn to the other side and share that with him. And at some point, They do, and it gets a little messy, but at some point, it's like, okay, for the last hour he's here and he's listening. For the last hour she's here, she's listening. Well, let's get some traction here. It's very different than individual. Individuals like breadcrumbs, methodical. Couples, it's like you said, house on fire, you know. But either way, it's interesting, curious, and hopeful that the individual or the couple will make it work.
So, what's something in general that you wish people understood about mental health?
I wish mental health had a different label because it's like going to school. You're learning, it's you're going to school. I'm a teacher. Uh, Go to class. The teacher teaches you. You do what you want with it. It's really no different. And I think as we get older with men, the two things that are our strength is actually works against us, our pride and our ego. Therapy does not have to be forever. It could be as long as you want it. You learn some tools and you go on with life. I don't expect to be a therapist for someone for 20 to 30 years. I would cut it off because you're dependent on me. And I don't want that. You have to learn to be dependent on yourself. Learn the tools. Life's going to throw you curveballs, work issues, health issues, relationship issues. It's coming. If you're dealing with it now, more stuff is coming. When you're turning 40, 50, retirement. I've had a slew of people for some odd reason coming in struggling with retirement. I don't know. I don't know what to do with myself. But wh- what am I? What? So what are we gonna do with that?
Yeah,
Or men who struggle because their wife or partner in the 40s and 50s and she's having hot flashes. Well, there's a thing called menopause. Let's educate ourselves. Life, there's a lot of landmines. Come in with the understanding I need to learn, I need to grow. I give you those lessons, and then you move on. Try not to make therapy more complicated than it really needs to be. But that comes down to you being honest and being pure of your investment, taking what you can and moving forward.
yeah. You help people with the tools, but not
I support
necessarily.
people. I support
Yeah,
people.
you can't hit the hammer on the nail for them. They got to do
No,
that.
no. And even if I could, I wouldn't want to because it's not my journey, and I completely respect that. Um, Whether you come in for 2 months or 2 years, 3 years, learn from it. And then, like school, you graduate and you go on with your life. At some point, we graduate from therapy, you go on with your life. And with that will be some confidence and awareness. So when life comes at you, which it will, you'll be more prepared.
Love that. Um,
And
how?
one last thing.
No, you're good.
If you have kids, you're teaching your kids. You're
Yeah,
teaching your kids. The kids are watching everything.
back to the generational thing, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's huge. I saw this. It was an image, um, and it was like it was representing three generations, and like one had a bunch of representing the grandmother or grandparent had a
Mhm.
bunch of knife marks in the back of their back, and like took it from their child, but a couple got through to your mother, and now she's got a couple on her back, and then there's you, the baby, that they're protecting and don't have that, trying to protect you from that trauma. So I think the more you work on your mental health, the better it is for your future generations, your kids, and people that look up to you, and being
Yep.
being that role model, I think is huge.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Jay, it's we said it's a crazy world, right? It's not gonna get less crazy tomorrow or next month. So, at least for your kids' sake, find some stability so when they're walking through the house, they don't hear mom and dad yelling and screaming, or dad's passed out, or dad's on the phone talking to a side chick. You know, Stability starts in the home. So even if the world is crazy, at least my home is safe and secure. And I feel 'cause that absolutely impacts kids as they grow older. And that
Yeah,
lowers the level of anxiety because I've been uh, loved, guided, directed, educated on life, on my future for 18, 17 years. And that's a really strong foundation to go into the crazy world. And with that comes boundaries. I know it's crazy out there. I know that boss is crazy or those kids are, but you know what? I got this love from home that no one's going to take away from me. The beauty of love, I say this all the time, you got to love yourself first. And I hear people say, oh, that's isolation. That's narcissistic. No, no, no. The beauty of love, it starts with you and then then it goes out.
Need that self-preservation, I think
Absolutely.
that's it's not
Absolutely.
selfish.
Yeah, yeah. But that if you can get that at home, it's a really, really strong foundation opposed to like a foundation. I bring up a comparison. If you have a house with a screwed up foundation, you can put all this nice shingles and the dressing, that house is messed up, right? But if you have a strong foundation, it's going to weather all the storms. Foundation starts at home. The first 3 or 4 years when you're understanding safety, you're understanding routines, you're understanding roles. When you become 8, 9, 10, when you're understanding your role in the family, your role in the community. 13, 14, 15, when you have your own self identity, understanding human development. Um, Although, mom and dad don't understand what I'm going through, but they got my back because they've showed me all this love. And mom and dad supporting that, a son and or a daughter is doing their own thing, but they're still in our house and they follow our rules. And then 17 and 18 or 19, when you leave the house, you know that wherever I go, I'm going to learn and take all the stuff I've had with me into that world. And if things aren't working out, at least I have that foundation to fall back on.
Yeah,
Even if
absolutely.
not even physically, at least I can call, right? And
Yeah, you
that
have that safety net.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's there even when things aren't going well, right? Even let's say I lose my job, or even my partner breaks up with me, or all right. I have that foundation of support and love that we're going to get through this. It's uncomfortable, it's all that real true stuff, but I'm going to figure this out. Instead of the fight or flight, this is the worst thing ever. I got to get out of here. I need a vape, or I need to get really, really drunk, or I need to beat up someone, or, that's, you can do that, but I'm telling you, because I'm an old man, it does catch up to you. It does catch up.
Yeah, and like you were saying, it's so important to have that foundation, and kids are sponges, and you subconsciously like take these things on, and then you don't realize until you're 20 years later talking to you,
Right.
like
Yep. Yep.
someone's in a session with you, like,
Yep.
well, this happened at 4
Right.
years old,
Yeah.
and
I just recently had these two couples that came in. Um, they're about to get married, and they're both feeling pressure from their families, and they want to have kids and all this, and they want to come and talk about their issues now. And I told them, I don't know why more couples don't do that. I
yeah, I
don't.
think that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah,
The divorce
and
rate probably would be a lot better if they did.
yeah,
I think a mandatory therapy
yeah.
session with George before you get
Well,
married.
not just me, but you
Well,
got
yeah,
to
yeah,
work
just
this stuff
yeah,
out. And you know what, Jay? The cool thing, they talked about the generational stuff that they hadn't really explored before. And, they went back and forth, but they able to put it behind them. And I commended them. And one got married a month ago, and another one got married in February, and I haven't heard back. But I said, you want to come back and talk? That's fine, but you got to learn to communicate, because I don't want to be the bad guy. You don't have kids yet. Uh, i- i- you don't know if you're going to have kids, right? You don't know. We all like to have kids, but life doesn't always work that way. You don't have houses. You don't know if that's going to go well. You got mortgage stress. Rates are climbing. You know how people going to change once you get married. Your friends going to. There's a lot of things coming. You got to have each other, right? Because it could make things very difficult.
back to like having a strong foundation in your house and everything, and building that safe place in such a tough social environment and everything. I don't think people realize how important that is, because if we're all doing that, if we're all working on it, if we're all working on having, this safe place for our kids, or just even a home, you and your couple, this is now it's going on a bigger scale. If we got, you know, thousands and, a bunch of people getting this snowball momentum effect of trying to, hey, we're going to have a healthy, good home. That I think will be huge, down the line where it's like, and, 20 years ago, and this is how people acted, and
Right.
this is how people thought in families, but not this generation, So I
Right.
think that's really cool because like people don't realize like that. It may feel like a small impact, and it is your circle. You should definitely have that, but if we're all trying to work on that, that is when we're talking bigger scale, and then hopefully in turn that makes just the social climate a little bit better at some way, shape, or form, in terms of stuff. Obviously there's things that we can't control,
Right.
but I think that's one of the beauties in that as well.
Here's something really cool that happened last night, and it's going to stay with me for a while. Actually, I'm going to talk to my daughters about it. Last night, a widower, a woman, and a black man landed in the ocean through NASA. They went around the moon further than anyone else in this world. A woman who 40 years ago probably couldn't get a job. A black man who maybe 30 years ago couldn't get a job. A widower who maybe because of the lack of resources 40 years ago wouldn't even consider working at NASA. I think last night was a good example of when you put your differences aside and you come together as a community, amazing things can happen.
Absolutely.
No politics, no gender bias, no racist stuff, no, none of that stuff that if we allowed it would have set all of that back. Yesterday, last night was a really, really good moment that everyone can uh, gain from and learn from. So if we can do that in such a crazy time, there's endless opportunities for us to come together as a community. You just gotta want it bad enough, and it doesn't have to be easy. All right, anything of value in your life doesn't come easy, and if it does, you're lucky. It's worth fighting for. Relationship, whether it's your family, it's worth to fight for.
Like you said, these people 50 years ago weren't getting jobs, like just rights and everything,
Yeah.
and having these small talk, small conversations, and they're so impactful. People don't realize when they're having these conversations in the 50s and 40s and all this, and they're trying to be progressive and try to change things and want the change, and they're like, oh well, it's just not happening, we're not seeing it. But it's like you people don't realize what you guys did then had
Hmm.
such a big impact now, you know what I
Right.
mean? And I think people need to realize that what you're doing today is it might not seem like a lot, but it is going to be impactful,
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
like your attitude towards life, and how you treat people and how you communicate, that affects humans,
Yep.
that affects society, that affects everything,
Right.
where especially when people are in an echo chambers. Like if you have a good echo chamber, where it's like you guys are positive, like heck yeah, like stay in that
Right.
stay in
Right.
that circle.
Right. Yeah, I always try to stress with people, my clients, slow down. I think unfortunately our culture, we just like quick, 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 quick.
Yeah,
Slow
especially up
down.
here, like in the Northeast, we're just so
Yeah.
like go
Know
go
your
go.
audience, know your role. Think before you speak. And if you slow down, you look at all your options so you don't have to recant it or deny it happened. And if we slow down, you'll have better results. All right. And it
Absolutely.
might be different. It might be controversial. That's okay. You got to own what you say and what you do. So just slow down.
So June's mental health month for men, correct? Is that all right? How important do you think it is to have a month for men's mental health?
Well, I think it's a good start. I think like every month should be,
Yeah, absolutely.
but it's an opportunity to explore what's going on with your own stuff, people around you, and just do exactly what you said. And try to understand how you impact the people around you and look at options. What's working for you and what's not working. And if something's not working, ask yourself, how can I change it? You know, change doesn't have to be the all or nothing drastic. It could be, maybe smoking a little less, or maybe, moderation. That's a big, big term that I don't think men, we don't use a lot. It's all or nothing. Moderation is a compromise. How will this affect me? And if it's uncomfortable, is that necessarily a bad thing? And how about my relationships? How are my relationships healthy? And what's healthy now might be different than 10 years ago. Um, do I need to contact people more often or maybe a little less? I think it's a good opportunity just to kind of look around and reassess and recalibrate uh, what how's your world is working for you or not.
Definitely. I think it brings, awareness. For instance, like I think it's pretty relatable to like, everyone tries to do New Year's resolutions, right? But it's like you don't have to wait till New Year. You can have resolutions all year long, and I think that's kind of the same thing with men's mental health. Is like it's just more so bringing awareness and realizing, oh yeah, like I gotta be good, and I want to be good for myself, and being able to do that every month, not just
You're right.
mental health month, right?
Right. Yep. And the guys who retired, they see me. They're definitely in the all or nothing. But
Yeah.
as we've talked about it, there's some subtle things you can do that it's okay. And different doesn't have to be worse. Different could be better. If you're obese, then what can we do to eat healthier? If you're drinking too much, what can we do to drink less? As well as ask, why are we drinking so much? I mean, and the solution is all right here. But you got to believe in yourself. Um, you know, I think a lot of men, we're afraid of change, but change is life, man. Change is, you know, that's so let's get the tools to adapt to change, you know?
Well, yeah, and I think the more, especially men, get stuck in their ways. And for instance, you said, I'm sure these guys that are retiring, they're probably workaholics in terms of like just that's why they don't know what to do with themselves because they didn't really have anything besides work out there, and they were so dead set on their work life and this is the way I am. This is life. This is the way
Uh,
it goes. And I feel like that pridefulness it come like you said it comes back to bite you and it makes it more difficult when you're not trying to break out of that shell. No, like you don't have to be occupied for 40 plus hours a week doing something. You could go have a lemonade on the porch or something, and you're retired.
yeah, I can hear and listen and process all types of words and phrases. But the one phrase that throws me overboard is when I hear a guy say, "Hey, I'm wired this way." I'm like, "What? You're not."
I, I,
That's like, I quit. I give
yeah,
up.
I feel like when people say that, when they're I am the way I am. To me, you're kind of saying that you're perfect, and you
Right.
you don't need to be worked on. And I think
Right.
as humans, we can always grow and be better. And
Yeah.
it's life changes all the time. The way we think, like you said, 10, 15 years ago, the way you
Right.
process things might be
Yeah.
different now. And just being open to, I think, being wrong too, and not necessarily wrong, but like just being open to like, you know what? I'm thinking differently now. I don't
Right.
have to
Right.
stick in my ways, and I don't have to think like that. And I'm people let their pride get in the way because that's just the way it is now. And
Right.
putting my flag in the ground, and that's it.
Right. When I hear, it's funny when you say that. When I hear people say those words, that I am the way I am, I hear fear. I'm scared. And what I normally do when I hear that, I go to my dry erase board and I write the word fear and I circle it and I point to it and I say, "This is holding you back." And the response usually is silence because it almost like it goes back to the little boy who just needed dad to say it's going to be okay. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say no because it's right to the core. And we sit with it, and I just try my best to let that person know this is past stuff that you're bringing forward, but you don't have to because we're talking about it. All right. That helps bat down the flames a little bit because we've exposed it. But it's a real thing that if there's the kryptonite for a lot of men, it's fear. We avoid it. We drink it, but we just don't really know. We try to pump it away, but that fear is sometimes it's um, self-imposed. And I think sometimes my role is to encourage them to open that door and put out that flame. And once they do that, they can do amazing things. They're like a different person because they realize, wow, I put out that fear that's been burning for years. But
And
it's real. It's real.
I try to remind myself because I certainly get in my head a lot, but it's only our only run at this, right? This is our life, and I try to remember, we won the lottery of life. Like the likelihood of us having this conversation right now is the likelihood is just so crazy if you just think about the vastness of the universe and just humans in general. Like
Hmm.
the fact that we're having this conversation right now is just to me it blows my mind sometimes. So I try to always remember that, like, hey, I know you're anxious, I know you're stressed, your heart's going, but hey, man, you're here this one time. If you believe in other things, of course. um, at least consciously, I assume this is the only life, and maybe another life in another lifetime. But yeah, it's just I try to remind myself, like, hey, don't don't hold back in terms of getting out of your comfort zone and trying to try new things. And for me, I also love diving into other cultures, and I love figuring out, like, how do you work? How do you do this? How do you cook this? How do you you
Hmm.
know? And I think that's super super important.
Mm, absolutely. And I think people appreciate that you want to hear their story, especially men who safeguard everything in a non-judgmental way.
And
And
I think a
yeah.
big thing for forgiveness too, especially I'm assuming a lot of times it's the elder people in their life that they're trying to give forgiveness and stuff like that too. And I think part of that, you're also assuming that they're still in your life. You're teaching them lessons as well because it's their first go at this too, right? So it's like, if you being a younger generation setting an example for your parents or your grandparents, I think that's a beautiful thing too, and like showing them that, like, hey, like, you can break this too, and like we can do this together. Or, you obviously you got to work on our own things, but it's, I'm not against you. We're on the same team, but I also can't swing the bat for you.
Right. Right. And you know, that could be scary. It could be stressful, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. And
Absolutely.
that could change and impact them for a lifetime.
I think that's absolutely true. And certainly, been amazing conversation so far. Is there anything else that you want to kind of throw in there? Anything that we didn't touch on that you want to hit on?
I'm leaning towards to starting a grief group next month. I
Okay.
just gotta get some resources. There are very few in-person grief groups in the state. Forget about southeastern Mass.
Now,
Um,
is that going to be open to every kind of gender, or would that be men's as well?
any gender,
Okay.
anyone
Cool.
who's struggling. I want to do some more research. I've been inundated for the last 2 years with people grieving, and there's a lot of information. I just got to put the time and energy into putting it together. Um, I'd love doing groups. It's a group, but it's a different vibe. But I might end up doing that pretty soon. But I think for any clinicians out there, there's one real important thing I got to stress is self care. Too many clinicians I've come across have either left the field or the fields has taken them out because they have no boundaries or they struggle with boundaries. And self care is essential. When I come home, uh, I don't work, I don't live where I work. So when I get in my car and I come home, I use music to help kind of detach. And my wife was to say, "How was work?" I really can't tell her, but I can tell her I just listened to a really good Stevie Ray Vaughan song, or I just listened to this cool Prince tune, or I listened to this old Aerosmith. Clinicians need to learn to set that boundary so they can move forward. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of young clinicians, because there's a lack of supervisors, because supervisors were overwhelmed during COVID, there's a lot of young clinicians coming in trying to make the quick money and not realizing it's going to catch up.
Yeah, this is
You
this is heavy stuff.
have to take care of you first. And there was a something what I was told in school is 100% true. You are the most important person on your caseload. And as long as you're aware of that, um, it's doable. And it's not my job is not easy at all, but it's super rewarding. I see 30 people a week, and every person is like my own private library. 1 hour of reading this really interesting book, and when that hour is done, I put it back and I read another one. And but at the end of the week, it's away. And on the weekend, I can just be me, and be dad, and be husband, and be friend. And that doesn't mean I'm less than as a clinician. I have my priorities and my boundaries firm. And any young clinicians, just you got to take care of yourself.
I'm really glad you touched on that because that was a question I had for you because you know I'm sure you know such as yourself there's probably you know you find ways to cope, you find ways to get through it, you find ways to separate yourself from you know your work and come home and have that self care. uh, would you say talking with other clinicians, do people, I guess, have would you suggest people, you know, maybe having a therapy for your therapist, you know, therapist?
I have my own therapist. I've been told the best therapists have therapists. I think unfortunately COVID, we got in a habit of isolating, but I go to trainings. And I literally go to trainings. I don't do trainings online because it's I think I know I have adult ADHD. After 15 minutes, I'm usually wondering what's on ESPN. I should be doing laundry. So I'm a people person. That's why I'm nosy. So I got to be with people. But there are other clinicians around that I contact consistently just to hear their stuff. They hear my stuff. That's one of the things that will ruin a private practice is isolation and bad habits, and you lose money, and it's just bad. But I'm fortunate. I surround myself with good clinicians, good people, and that's not going to change.
You guys are humans at the end of the day, you know, and people need to realize that, like, hey, like you guys have your own stuff working through, and you know, like you said, you got to be good for yourself so you can be good for others. It's just it's a circle. Like, everyone has to find that.
I think a mistake that a lot of young clinicians have is they want to save the world. They want to be clinicians for the world, and you'll burn out quick, right? Because it's easy to access the world now. But you know, Friday night to Sunday night, Celtics, Bruins, sports. I'm a
Heck yeah.
dad. I love cutting my grass. I don't mind doing laundry. My clinical world is over Friday night, and I'm okay with that. And I think that's why I've been in the field as long as I have, and that's not going to change. And if that doesn't work for clients, that's okay. That's all right. I can't be everything to everyone.
Yeah, and I think
Uh,
that's so important too to you know have those boundaries and be able to you know I think it's everyone's learning to try to shut off after you know you come home from your work week, right? You want to be able to you know separate yourself from that and live your life and have that self-care that you need, you know. So that's a beautiful thing, and you know kudos to you, you know. It must, I'm very empathetic person, so so many stories every week, and you know again we're in a difficult climate in terms of everything. So I commend you for being able to do that, and yeah, I really appreciate people that are big on mental health and trying to make everyone you know in a better headspace. So thank you.
no problem. No problem.
And you know I also find it very unique because in terms of business, it's probably unique because you're not out there marketing in terms of like you know you're not going to email someone and be like, hey, I'm a therapist. For me, I do direct marketing, so I'm reaching out and like, hey, by the way, I'm a voice actor, you want to use my voice? So that's probably also, I'm sure it was an interesting challenge at this point now that you're established. But yeah, I'm sure that was also like a big hurdle to kind of
In
get
some
through, you
ways,
know.
I was lucky because um, I was told years ago when I did my internship at Salem State, I have two things going for me, two things going against me. The two things going for me is I'm black and I'm a male. The two things going against me is I'm black and I'm a male. So that my supervisor says you can do one or two things, George. You can either feel bad and be a victim and pout and fall into the stereotypical role, or teach people that the stereotype is wrong and allow people to see another side. So because of that, I'm easy to market because there are very few black men in Southeastern Mass who are LICs. Very few. So I'm okay if people say, hey, the black guy, because I'm the only one.
Yeah.
And that cost me nothing. So that's, would I want to have others in my community? Absolutely. But I can't, I can only do what I can do. I reach out, I go to trainings, but I don't see who I am as something that is working against me as a bad thing. I'm marketing by just being me. And maybe by me being out there, it would open up other people's eyes that a black man can do this and encouraging other black men to do it. But I've never been one to really look at the negatives of what I bring to the table. I've always been very optimistic and positive, and that I think that's helped me for 32 years to work through systems, get out of it unscathed, and make some good connections, and just keep moving instead of looking behind and feeling sorry for myself. That's what I tell my clients. Right, so I should do what practice what I preach. Right?
Like you said, you could have gave into the stereotypes as a black male, but you embraced it, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Like you're like, I'm the only black male doing this in this area, and that's unique, and that's who I am. And I also think you're setting an example for the black community and showing them that, like, hey, you can do this too. And yeah, I think that's super amazing, and hopefully influencing future black mental health people. And I think it's, again, doing the small things that you don't even realize that is having effect. You could have had a conversation with someone and they told their son, and now their son's like, I want to be, a
Yeah.
therapist when I grow, or whatever it might be. So I think um, you are certainly making a huge impact for sure. So I think that's amazing what you're doing.
It's it's definitely rewarding. The rewards overweighs the grind of the private practice of the finances, fighting with insurances. It's a pain in the butt. I knew that coming in, and I'm okay with it because it's nice to be able to um 30 hours a week, I'm giving someone support. That way overweighs all the fighting and that business nonsense. And I'm fortunate at my age, this stage of my life, to be able to say that I love what I do. I'm blessed. So I'm not going to allow any other issues, things that I can't control, slow down where I'm at right.
Yeah, you had that, midlife change, so to say, not become a midlife crisis,
You
because
got it. You
you
got
you
it.
you handled the situation that you want to do, and now you're doing what you want to do. So I think
Right.
that's beautiful.
Yep.
Um, are you accepting, I guess, patients right now? Or are you
Yep. I don't like to do wait lists.
okay?
That's stressful. I'll fit people in. I'm in New Bedford Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and I have a site now in Stoughton on Thursdays and Fridays, so I can tap into the Brockton Easton area. So yeah, I'm very fortunate to be able to expand, being a one man show, and see where things go. And I'm starting probably another men's group in the fall in Stoughton. So yeah, things are good. Business is good.
I know you mentioned telehealth. Do you offer, I guess, outside of Massachusetts, or are you just
Nope.
trying to? Okay,
I'm just
strictly Mass.
Commonwealth based.
Okay, perfect, awesome. I'll put that in the show notes too. That way, people want to reach out, they can do so. Any parting words or words of wisdom before we wrap it up?
Take care of yourselves, everyone. take care of yourselves. Systems aren't going to do it for you. We got to learn that. Whether it's get some sun, do some breathing, set some boundaries, we're responsible for ourselves. So do that and be that role model for your son, daughter, grandkids.
Love that. Well, George, thank you so much for coming on, and we had a deep conversation and very beautiful conversation, and something that we need to talk about. And mental health is such a big thing that we need to be conscious of. And I hope that as Men's Mental Health Month, that some people, some males, and everyone just reflects a little bit and just takes care of themselves mentally. So thank you so much, George. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Jay. It's been a pleasure. Take care, buddy.
Well, that about wraps it up. Thanks for tuning in to Mike Happens Podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe on Spotify and available on my website, voiceswithj.com, and other streaming services. And join me each episode as we explore the beautiful, hilarious, and inspiring ways life shapes our stories. Until next time, remember, every story matters, especially yours.